Hey everyone, it's Mike Tushir. We're back again with another RTS guided programming coaching call. Got a lot of good questions again today. You guys never seem to fail to send in some good ones. So on the line helping me out today, we've got Mark Robb. Pretty sure everybody has had a chance to kind of virtually meet him or be introduced to Mark at least in some way. But just in case you haven't, I've worked with Mark for quite a few years. Mark's a high-level powerlifter. He's going to Finland this summer for his second World Championship. He'll be defending his gold medal that he won from last year. Yeah, so if you want to know more about Mark, we can definitely introduce him again. But he's here today just so he's going to help out and offer some perspective, a little more of a hands-on perspective. Getting new questions in already. Wow. Okay. So let me just go ahead and jump right into things, and we'll keep this thing moving. So as always, we'll start out by talking about executing the workout. So just to get that started, the first question that we've got is how long should the rest periods be? Now, that may seem like a simple question, like, well, 5 minutes or however many. But as with a lot of things, once you get into a little more depth, it's not quite so easy. The way that we recommend you monitor your rest intervals is by we suggest that you kind of have a time limit for the whole exercise for all of your work sets, and it should be right around 30 minutes. So it shouldn't take you more than 30 minutes to accomplish all of your work sets. And in some cases, you may want to limit that to more like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So what that does is it allows you to have some kind of flexible rest periods. If you have a real easy set, then you can take a shorter rest because you don't need as much of a rest. Now, if you have a really tough set, then you can take a longer rest because you'll need a longer rest. So you can also kind of use that to your advantage. If you know that you've got like a really tough set coming up and you need another minute to make sure that you're ready for it, then go ahead. That's fine. That's a benefit of having some flexible rest periods. But generally, you're going to get I hesitate to say full recovery, but pretty close to full recovery between your sets. And I'll go ahead and let Mark get in on this as well. Mark, how do you monitor your rest periods? How much of a rest do you take between sets and whatnot?
Well, you pretty much said it. I mean, that's pretty much how I do it as well. Of course, I've got the benefit of having a training partner most of the time, and that actually right now I've got two training partners. One fellow's a novice, but that kind of sets up a pace because somebody's always doing a set. As soon as one person finishes doing a set, then the next person starts with 3 people. But with 2 people, just my training partner Chad and I, sometimes there's a little bit of a lag between, when he's actually doing a working set and when I'm doing a set. Like you said, we pretty well go pretty quick through the warm-ups and then maybe slow down with the at 9 sets or, at 8 repeat sets, that type of thing where it's sort of maximal work. But pretty much just like you said.
Okay. Well, that's good. The next question we've got is for pulling sumo. This person says they pull sumo and they're wondering about rack pulls. Should they pull their rack pulls sumo as well? Generally, I'm going to say if you can, yes, you should. Now, some people are limited for equipment reasons for one way or another. So if you can't, if your rack pulls have to be conventional, then that's acceptable. But I think the ideal situation is to pull your pull with your competition stance as much as possible. With that said, if you're one of the people that have trouble pulling sumo all the time, it hurts your hips get beat up, then it would be acceptable to make that change as well. But just excuse me, sorry, as a default stance, use your competition stance. And then if you have a reason to change it, then that's okay, but just as a default, use your competition stance. Now, Mark, we don't have a whole lot of rack pulls in your program, but of any of the guys that you coach, do you use rack pulls in their programs? And if you do they use them with their competition stance, or do you vary that?
No, anybody that I coach, I haven't used rack pulls. I think there's usually something better, some better tool, that I can find that works better for addressing whatever we need to be addressing. But if I did have them doing rack pulls, I certainly would have them doing sumo rack pulls if they pulled sumo. I mean, as close, like you said, I think as close to the competition lift as possible is the way to go.
So if you tend to opt for things other than rack pulls, what kinds of things do you choose?
Well, I love pause deadlifts. I think they're a super tool for teaching how to get tight in the bottom of a deadlift. They're also obviously creating a whole lot more time under tension in that position. They're building strength at that point off the floor, which is going to help you everywhere. I think they teach, like I said, correct starting position, which is going to translate to correct finishing position. So they're probably my favorite. I mean, a lot of people hate them and they suck because they're hard, and that's the whole point.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely make sure to include our fair share of pause deadlifts. I'm sure pause deadlifts are a familiar feature to everybody listening. That's actually all of the executing the workout questions that we've got for this week. So let's go on and get into program modifications. The next question there is, how would I go about switching to sumo deadlift? Should I start that now, or should I wait till my next cycle begins, kind of do it at the beginning of a training cycle? So if you're a conventional deadlifter now and you're interested in trying out sumo to see if it's a good fit for you or not, you don't necessarily have to wait till the beginning of a training cycle, but since it may not work out, you want to leave yourself enough space so that should it not work out, you can still be in shape for your contest or your test day. So what I'm going to outline is kind of a 4-week trial for sumo deadlifts, and I'll kind of describe how we do that in a second. But you don't want to do that like your last 4 weeks or probably even 6 weeks out from a contest, So, I mean, in that sense, if you can do it at the beginning of a training cycle, that's going to be probably the best. But at the same time, if you don't want to wait, as long as you have enough time, that's okay. So, assuming that you have enough time, or when you do have enough time, how would you go about trying that out? What I would say is just do it. Just switch all of your deadlift movements to sumo movements, and try it for 4 weeks. So exclusive sumo deadlifting if possible for 4 weeks. If it beats up your hips, then obviously scale that back a little bit. But the idea is you want to find out 2 things from doing this sumo trial. You want to find out, first, is your sumo deadlift even comparable to your conventional deadlift? And second, does your sumo deadlift respond to training? So the first one, you want to make sure that you're able to pull weights that are at least in the ballpark of your conventional deadlift. And second, you want to make sure that your sumo deadlift's actually improving. You know, since it's not something that you've trained in the past, it should improve pretty nicely from one week to the next. So watch your estimated 1 rep max and make sure that that's trending upwards nicely. If it's kind of struggling or lingering on, that is an indication that it may not be responding to training all that well. So usually a combination of those two data points give us enough information to decide if sumo is worth pursuing more long term or not. So that's usually how we run that. It's usually we start with a 4-week test, and if that goes well, then we basically just continue. You know, you just continue doing everything as sumo as much as you can. And that's your new stance. Now, if it's not as strong and it's not responding to training, basically if the test fails and you're going to be a conventional puller, then you just kind of go back to what you were doing before the sumo trial. Mark, you're actually a real-life sumo puller. I'm not. What do you think about that process? Kind of the 4-week trial kind of process.
I agree. I mean, I don't know, the 4-week trial might be a little short. I mean, actually, when I started pulling sumo, an experienced powerlifter told me, you know, to allow 3 to 4 months to learn it. I think that's maybe a little on the long side, but I will say that I believe that the sumo is more technical. There's not quite as much margin for error. Let's say the groove's a little smaller or whatever, if you will. But I agree with you. I mean, I wouldn't wait for, well, I guess the question was start now or wait for next cycle to begin. I think it depends on how far you are out from a competition is what I would say. Not so much based on the cycle, but based on, you know, does the cycle end with a competition? If the cycle ends with a competition, I would not try to start learning sumo. If the cycle is whatever, just a cycle leading up to a test day or something like that, yeah, do it. And yeah, I agree. You know, I think first though, you're probably gonna have to allow 4 or 5 weeks just to learn the movement. You know, sort of based on your 80% heuristic for technique. Like I said, I think there's going to be more technical error, possibility for technical error. So
I think that's a good point about waiting for whether or not your cycle ends with a competition or a test day. That's a good point. Well, Mark, I kind of cut you off on that. Was that basically what you wanted to say regarding sumo?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, sorry about cutting you off there. The next question we've got is right after the test day, I'm going to be forced to take a week off of training. I've got some travel and stuff where they're not going to have the opportunity to train. And they wonder, should I ditch the test day and do a high volume week instead? The worry here is just in general about losing momentum. I would say don't ditch the test day. This comes up again later on in our call. Just the notion about lost training time and things like that. I mean, we don't want to intentionally just kind of give away training time, of course, but we need to be aware of kind of the big picture too, which is why it's good that you guys are asking these questions. We don't need to push all the time. So in this situation, you've got a test day, and then you're going to follow that test day up with follow that test day up with a week of off of training, you will lose a little momentum like that. So when you come back, I wouldn't expect to still be busting out PRs and stuff like that. But we just need to know that that's okay. That's not the end of the world. Now, you may come back and still hit some PRs and stuff. That has happened before. Just manage your expectations appropriately. The thing to keep in mind and what you'll gain by continuing to follow through with that test day is this. You'll go through the test, and then you have a week off of training. And maybe that's more than enough time that, you don't need that much time for recovery. You'll be well recovered. You'll do the test. Frankly, the test isn't that hard. And then you take a week off, and you kind of detrain a little bit. Yeah, that can happen, but that's okay, because during that time, what will happen is your body will get more sensitive to the training anyway. So that when you come back, you may, let's say, what's the worst that can happen strength-wise? When you come back, you can be a little weaker, like you can have lost some strength, right? But you'll be more sensitive to the training, and in my experience, your sensitivity to training is going to trump any strength that's lost from just taking a week off of training. So what I'm getting at is this. You may lose a little bit of strength from taking that week off, but what you'll gain is faster progress once you resume training. So I think that it's going to be a net win, and it actually comes at just the right time. Now, if you said you had a week off of training and it's 14 days out from a meet, then it's a different conversation. Then our priorities are different. It still does the same things in terms of physiology, but our priorities in training are just a little bit different at that point. I hope that makes sense. Mark, I'll let you kind of chime in as well. I know that you and I talk about momentum, maintaining momentum, losing momentum, and stuff like that a lot. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with you. The momentum thing is huge to me. I mean, that's like the number one thing. And as far as taking a week off training, forced or otherwise, I think this situation's probably just about almost ideal. Because normally after a big competition, and the week after that, I'm shot, not worth a damn anyway. So sometimes it's almost better just to coast that week or even take the whole week off. So that's perfect. Test day isn't quite, like you said, as intense as a big meet day or whatever, but still, that's sort of like a 1 week transition week, if you will. And if you're worried about losing momentum, if I were worried about losing momentum during that 1 week off, I think what I would do is not allow myself to recover as much as I might otherwise during the week leading up to the test day. Maybe that kind of help you coast through until you can get back to training. So you may not have quite 100% performance on the test day. It might be 99 or 98%, whatever, but it's only a test day. It's not a meet. And, and that would keep your momentum going. So I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think that what it all boils down to is that given the timing of things, having a week off is not anything to worry about. Yeah, I think that's going to be kind of the short answer to that. Let's see. Next question here. My pause gets inconsistent if I practice once a week or less. We're talking about pause bench press here. Can I substitute touch and go bench for competition pause bench? Yeah, you can. You can. In a situation like this where you have a clearly defined, it's better for you to perform more pause benching, then go for it. That's a substitution that I'm comfortable with. And then kind of a follow-up to that is, why do we do touch and go bench anyway? The reason that we have touch and go in the program the idea is that when you do a touch and go bench, you get a little bit more of a stretch reflex, and most people can handle a little bit more weight. And I mean a little bit, like 2.5 to 5 kilos, so 5 to 10 pounds more weight. So we're talking about a small amount. Since we're talking about such small amounts of weight, there's enough variance that some people will be able to pause bench just as much as they can do on a touch and go. But the central idea behind doing the touch and go is having a small amount more weight plus the added stretch reflex. It's going to help you develop your strength over the long term. And it's not sufficiently different from a competition pause bench to make any difference, really. So that's why we have touch and go in the program. And also that's why, since touch and go and competition pause are such close substitutes of one another, that's why it's perfectly fine if you want to substitute out your touch and go bench for competition pause work. I'm okay with that. Next question we've got is, how do I modify the program for forearm / elbow pain? Probably talking about forearm and elbow, like tendonitis, some sort of tendon inflammation. The short answer here, nothing fancy. You're just going to have to let it heal. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there in terms of different techniques and stuff that promise to heal tendonitis injuries and things like that faster, but basically it's just one of these things that takes a little time to heal. And things like active rest and stuff like that don't really help because it's an overuse injury. You know, I mean, you have an injury from using it too much, so using it more makes the injury worse. So yeah, so we basically have to rest it. We have to let it heal. And to do that, I would say don't do anything that's causing you pain or discomfort. So we're talking about elbows, forearms. Usually we're talking about bench pressing and squatting. If that stuff hurts, then you have to skip it. And I know it sucks, and I know nobody wants to skip training. Nobody in this group, anyway, wants to skip training. But you're just going to have to deal with it. You know, you're just going to have to take the time that you need to get the rest that you need, you know. And then after you get it healed up, we have to do something differently. You can't just go back into the same program that you've always done, because you'll end up more or less in the same position. So if the cause is your grip in the squat, as it often is, then we need to change something about your grip in the squat. So let's just assume for a minute that that is the problem. One thing that you could do differently is try a thumbless grip or moving to a wider grip in the squat. You can also try to stretch your shoulders. That may help take some tension off of the elbow. You can try wearing elbow sleeves during squatting and things like that. But basically, it almost always comes back to a grip adjustment. Yeah, so if you can do that and that addresses the core issue, then you shouldn't end up in the same problem again. So Mark, I know that you've had issues in the past with different dings and stuff like that. Do you have any advice for this person?
Well, yeah, it's like you said. I think it's got to be, ultimately, it's got to be allowed time to heal. That's basically, you know, all there is to it. Now, how do you do that? You can, you know, you and I have done workarounds. The safety squat bar is a great one to get the pressure off your, I mean, if it's being caused by squats, which mine was, and I still even have problems with it sometimes. You know, like you said, try a thumbless grip, slide your grip out wider, at least to help it heal. Workaround, safety squat bar, front squats. I prefer the safety squat bar myself. I think the other thing that actually helps me a lot more than anything else, elbow sleeves never really did anything. I've tried everything. One thing was manual therapy, just trying to basically facilitate fluid exchange, because that inflammation gets trapped in there. And if you can either, use your thumb or your fingers, whatever, to try to move it out and break up knots. My chiropractor even usually it's in the brachioradialis for me, and my chiropractor will get in there with his thumbs and find knots and break the knots up, which hurts like hell. I can't do it to myself because it hurts too bad, but he breaks that stuff up, and that really helps with the healing. The other thing that really helped me a lot was wrapping my elbow and forearm before I start squatting with either jump stretch band really tight or those voodoo bands, basically compressing it, so all the fluid is pushed out, and then when you release it, you get a rush of fresh blood in there, and that really seemed to help as far as the pain during the squatting. So that's how I've dealt with it, and it's been successful. So
keep in mind with stuff when it comes to stuff like voodoo bands and stuff like that, that it doesn't really heal the problem. That it's a workaround, it's a way to kind of keep you doing stuff, but it doesn't really address, like, it's not healing anything. It's maybe lessening your pain response, but nothing is physically getting healed from doing that stuff. So it's fine to do. And I also really like your suggestion about the safety squat bar. That's one that I didn't think of. So if you have access to a safety squat bar, that can be a good way to continue to train your squat while this is kind of healing up. But just keep in mind that it does have to actually heal. All right, so let's move on to the next one. We've got quite a few scheduling questions this week. The first one is, sorry, actually, before I move on, I missed this question. So I need to go back and pick up this question. So the question is about combining some workouts. If you have, let's see, let me make sure I understand this right, Mike, because I'm kind of taking this question on the fly. You have a need to combine your priority 1 and priority 2 workouts. So you need to kind of pick and choose the important stuff and combine them into one workout because you're kind of pressed for time this week. Is that about right? Now, I'm not totally familiar with your scheduling issues going on, but if that's the case, then you're basically just going to pull the 3 competition movements out. So a priority 1 workout typically is squat, bench, and depending on the template, some type of overhead work. And then your priority 2 workout tends to be deadlift, some sort of like assistance benching, and then followed up with some supplemental squatting. So usually in a situation like that, if you need to combine them, you're just going to do competition movements. So you have a workout that's competition squat, comp bench, and comp deadlift. So yeah, that's going to be a brutal workout. But I'm glad you said that you only have time to manage one workout this week, because that's kind of the only time I would think that you would want to do that. If you had 2 sessions planned for that week, you would do the priority 1 and the priority 2, and you would just kick out the rest. But given that you only have time for 1 session that week, if I was going to combine priority 1 and 2, I would make sure to hit the comp movements, and that's going to be about it. So moving on, like I said, we've got quite a few scheduling questions this week. Scheduling. So when it comes to specialized peaking programs, I've got several questions on when will we start specialized peaking for certain dates and things like that. So I just want to shed a little more light on specialized peaking programs and what we're doing with that. Currently, we're handling specialized peaking for any competitions that are happening through the end of April. If your competition happens after April, then as we've said, just choose the latest test date of the training that you're sent, and stick with the program. When we get a little closer, then we'll do specialized peaking for those meets. So just to kind of give you guys a frame of reference on what we're talking about, if the meet that you really care about, you have a competition that you're planning on doing in October, well, specialized peaking for that probably won't start until the end of the summer. We're not talking about like the last 4 weeks or something like that. It will be a full run-up, 8 or more weeks probably. It'll be a full workup program. It's not just the peaking end of it. But even at that, if your meet isn't until October, then that final peaking phase isn't going to start till the end of the summer. Now, if your meet is in May, then that means we'll probably start specialized peaking for that kind of toward the end of March. So again, you'll get, depending on where you're at in May, you'll get 8 to 12 weeks of peaking training for that competition date. And so just kind of keep an ear out. I've been thinking about how I want to manage this, and I'm going to send you guys an email because I think that will be a little less likely for people to miss. So I'll send an email out as far as what specialized dates that we're opening up for whenever we open up for new ones. So you can kind of think of this like we have certain windows that are open, to target for meets in certain windows of training. So we'll open up the new window, and I'll make sure to send everyone an email about that just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of a coaching call. So the next question we've got for scheduling is my goals are to peak for nationals in October. There's a couple smaller competitions in March and then in June/July. Which competitions should I do, and should I do a full peak for them? If your competition is in October, that's the main one, that's the one that you really care about, then you can just stick with the plan for right now. Doing a competition in March and then another one in July, June or July, that's actually a really good rhythm to be on. That's the rhythm that I would be on myself if I was healthy for my March competition. But I plan to compete in June and then again in October myself. So that's obviously a ripple that I think is beneficial. Otherwise, I would change something about it. So for you, I think that'll be fine. You can compete in all of those competitions, and you probably should compete in all of them, because by competing often, you get better at competing. Competing itself is a skill, much like training is, much like strength is. So it would be good to do those contests. Now, whether or not you should full peak for them, there's a little bit more information on this, and generally it seems like the worry is that by doing a full peak for a competition, you basically miss out on 2 weeks of training because you have the deload for the meet, and then the week after the meet is usually reintroduction type of work. So by doing that for two different competitions, you end up with 4 weeks of training that aren't really heavy training weeks. So there's a concern that you'd miss out on 4 weeks worth of training. Again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it all that much, just because missing out on 4 weeks of training over the course of a year, it's not even really missing out, okay? Because you're still getting a training effect, and we're still using that effect to our advantage. So let's say that you weren't planning on doing those meets. What we would have to do is vary your training loads so that some weeks were high training loads, other weeks are low training loads, and some weeks are in between, and so forth. What we do with that is we vary the training loads to create an effect. And the effect that we are trying to create is more strength, obviously, but also more work capacity. We want you to be able to handle more work. We want you to be able to recover from training more easily so that we can basically pile more work on you and make you stronger and stronger as long as you want to get stronger. So what we do in the sense of having frequent competitions, and by the way, this isn't really frequent competitions, this is normal competing schedule, it's not disruptive. It just, we build that into our volume and intensity cycles. So you don't even have to think of it as missing out on 4 weeks worth of training, because it's like what I said in the question earlier about sensitizing you to volume. You'll get a better response from training once you return to normal training after competition. I don't know if anybody else, Mark, maybe you've noticed that happening, but I notice it all the time. So like I'll do a meet, you know, and kind of in that final run up, going up to the meet, you know, assuming that you're pushing everything as hard as you can, you're not really progressing like a rocket anymore as you close in on the competition. Hopefully you're still progressing, but it's not, you know, it's not to an extreme degree, you know. But then I'll do the meet, and then after the meet's over, I'll return to normal training, which is usually much higher in volume than it is during the peaking cycle, and you get a nice boost to your progress. You know, a boost that you weren't getting before the peak. You know, so to me, it's like, well, what's the difference? The difference is, you know, you resensitize yourself to the volume throughout the peaking cycle, and then especially during those last couple weeks of meet prep. Have you ever noticed anything similar to that, Mark?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, and I agree. You know, I mean, you don't leave much for me to say, because you pretty much, I agree with everything you just said. And yeah, I agree with, you know, he asked which meets should he do. I'd say all of them, especially if you're a intermediate or, you know, beginning or intermediate level lifter. Like you said, the practice is to get good at competing, you have to compete. I don't think there's any other way around it. And the only way to do that is, you know, try to compete. Well, in the beginning, 3 or 4 times a year. I'd say 3 minimum. 4 probably is a good number. 5 may be a little excessive. But, and I think you gain more from that than by whatever you may have potentially missed out on as far as training goes. Plus the fact that you were just talking about being sensitized to you know, to training again, resensitized. Yeah. So by all means, compete.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. Next question we've got as far as scheduling, my day 2 always has 4 movements: comp bench, deadlift, then overhead pressing variation, and a squat variation. And I need to break this up in the interest of time. So what would be the best way to go about breaking that up? Basically, any way you want. I know that's probably not the answer that you were looking for. I think the way that I would do it, I would do my competition bench and deadlift in one day, just because it would be harder. It'll be a harder workout to do it that way, but it gives you more space in terms of you're not having like a full-on leg day and a full-on bench day, so it increases your frequency in that sense. But also it makes it a little bit more competition realistic, and it places your comp bench and your comp deadlift a little closer to your comp squat. So it just gives you an overall more realistic picture. That's how I would split that up. Yeah, anything to add to that one in particular, Mark?
No, I agree with you completely there. That's the way I'd break it up as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to do it a different way, it's not a big deal. But I think if I was going to do it, that's how I would do it. That pretty much says it all, I guess. So, moving on to some other questions that we've got. This one's about the deadlift. Why is my deadlift so slow at the lockout? So, in the email, they mentioned that conventional deadlifts are slow at the lockout. Sumo deadlifts are slow off the floor. And they deadlift sumo, so they're wondering why their sumo is slow at the lockout. something that you need to know, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily agree with your starting assumption that conventional is slow at lockout and sumo is slow off the floor. I think what you're seeing, I think to refine that a little bit more, it depends on the lifter's back position. If you're a flat back deadlifter, regardless of whether you're sumo or conventional, then you're going to be slow off the floor. And if you're a round back deadlifter, you're going to be slow at the lockout. Typically, you see conventional deadlifters tend to be a little bit more round back, and sumo deadlifters tend to be a little more flat back, but that's not always the case. Now, we watched a video the last 2 weeks, actually, of a sumo deadlifter who's pulling with a round back style, and he's slow at the lockout. And that's why. He's slow at the lockout because he pulls with a round back style. And the reason this happens is when you pull with a round back style, it gives you a better leverage position when the bar is on the floor. It puts your hips closer to a vertical line with the bar so that you have better leverage to get the bar moving off the ground. Now, once you pass your knees, then your contribution from your hips and your quads is pretty much gone. And what's left of the movement is basically back extension. You have to extend your spine. So at that point, your spine is in a poor leverage position. So that's why it's hard to lock out a round back deadlift. If you deadlift in a flat position, you're at a leverage disadvantage in the bottom because your hips are further behind the bar. Now, once you pass knee level, well, your back's already locked out, and then your hips and your knees are in a much stronger leverage position because they're partly extended, and that's why people usually fly through the lockout if they're pulling from a flat position. So, yeah, that's why your sticking point is where it is in the deadlift. Let's talk a little bit about psyching up. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but we just want to add a little more nuance to it today. In the past, I've said, if you're the kind of lifter that needs to psych up a lot to lift max weights, we want to limit that, but at the same time, we don't want your performance to drop too much. Well, that begs the question on how much of a performance drop is too much. Should you allow your performance to drop, 10 kilos, 5 kilos? What's too much? And yeah, so I can see where that would be a little bit confusing. So just to kind of circle back and hopefully clarify this a little bit. You don't want, I would say you don't want to get maximum psyched up for your lifts, because if you get maximum psych going on, then that's draining, as a lot of you have experienced and told me about. So don't get maximum psyched up. But also, if you're totally low on the psych curve, I guess, if you're coming into your lift very relaxed, then your performance isn't going to be good there either. So I would say kind of that middle ground position. Now, how do you know if you're in a middle ground position? Well, that's tough because, and it's kind of one of those things that at this point I can't think of a better way to say it other than it just kind of takes practice. What you want to experience is a pretty good performance. It may not be a maximum performance just because if you were maximum psyched, then your performance is going to be a little better. But you shouldn't have big recovery issues. You shouldn't build up this recovery debt on account of you being psyched. Also, it shouldn't be impossible for you to do repeat sets and things like that. Some days are better than others, and I understand that. And if you go for a big weight, then maybe you get a little more psyched for it or something like that, and that's going to happen. That's fine. But you just want to make sure, just try to throttle it back from that a little bit. If maximum psych is red line, we want to back it off, 2 or 3 notches. So it's still reasonably high arousal when you're doing your lifts, but it's not to the point where it'll cause you to have recovery issues. It's not a point where it's super difficult to get in that place every time. It's a repeatable thing. So if you're one of these people that has a tendency to get super psyched up, when you do your top set, a lot of times you drop 5%. Let's say it's a load drop and you drop 5%. A lot of times, there's a big performance drop there, and that drop set might be a 10, or you may even miss lifts. So in a situation like that, you should probably do a little bit more than a 5% drop. A 5% load drop is kind of a rule of thumb. We want you to be at that 5% if it's possible. Now, if it's not possible, if you're going to be missing reps and stuff like that, then drop more than 5%. Mark, I know that you and I have had quite a few in-depth conversations about psyching up and the relative merits and whatnot. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, we've talked before about a workmanlike attitude.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to be honest with you, I'm not sure personally that I get maximum performance out of a maximum psych. I think I get more maximum performance out of somewhat less than a maximum psych. Maybe it helps me stay focused a little better or something. I don't know. I'm just not sure that being totally psyched up is gives you maximum strength development or whatever. But
it'd be interesting to see how that changes over a lifter's career, because I feel the same way. Like I've been in situations where I've had to actively calm myself down in competitions, just because the emotion of the moment is kind of too much, and I know that I'm going too far, and so I have to actively try to calm myself down just to make sure that I'm able to perform my technique correctly. So I wonder if things like that change as a lifter's career progresses.
Yeah, well, that could be too. I know it's certainly evolved for me, and the one thing that's been pretty much consistent is trying to approach training, at least with a workmanlike attitude, which keeps the stress level down, makes it easier to recover. I get good performance, good solid performance, and so that's kind of, as you said, I think earlier, a trained effect as well, to be able to get into that certain mindset or certain level of psych for every heavy, hard set. In other words, get into that level and then do your set. As soon as you're done with it, relax and turn it off.
Yeah, you just get better at switching, right? Like you try not to stay psyched up all the time. Yeah, for this person in particular, from the sound of their email, I don't think they're staying there too long, but I know that, when you really kind of fly off the handle for a big lift, it's really difficult to do that, week in or week out. And what most of these programs are asking you guys to do is much more than that. We have lots of heavy training multiple times a week. So, really kind of getting that heavy psych is difficult, and it'll kind of become a self-correcting problem a little bit, because sooner or later you get tired. You just can't get up for it anymore, but you can help yourself along by kind of being okay with that process, and just kind of getting as psyched as you need to, Yeah, you just try not to do more than is necessary, I guess.
Yeah.
So hopefully that clears up some questions on psyching up. If you guys have more, let me know, and we'll revisit this topic. It's a difficult one to kind of put your finger on. So if we need to chat about it some more, then let me know. I'll just try to hurry this up a little bit because we're starting to run out of time. Next question is, I'm currently in my off season. When will the volume go back up? And it will go back up in a couple of weeks. We're working towards some test days right now. So if you're just coming off, like so say that you just came off a test day and then you joined guided programming, so you're in this without a whole lot of background context. You can think of this as your intensity phase. You're having a phase of training with lots of higher intensity work. Now, in another couple weeks, you know, depending on where you're at, in another couple weeks, the volume's going to go back up, and we'll have another volume phase. So things will definitely cycle. You're definitely on a long-term planning process. So this will progress, keeping your long-term progress in mind for sure. The next question is, how do I warm up for the contest? Now, to answer this, we talked last week about meet cards, and I posted a meet card on the forum. So I just want to show that to you guys real quick. So I'm going to pause this, and let's see, I want to make sure that you guys can all see that. All right, so this is a view of the forum. Now, if you, right now, it's the attempt selection sheet topic. So I'll try to remember to put a sticky on this so it doesn't get buried. But this is the thread that you want. If you go into attempt selection sheet, you'll be able to download the meet card. Now, when you open up the meet card and you put in your goal weights, we talked about this last week, so you could check out that coaching call if you like. We'll check the when you check the goal weights and you enter your goal weights into the meet card, it's going to populate attempt selection, but it'll also give you warm-ups and the timing of your warm-ups. So I would say that's the ideal. If you can perform that warm-up schedule, I think that would be ideal. If you can't for some reason, if you need more warm-ups or fewer warm-ups or something like that, that's okay. But that's what I would use as a starting point. So let me get back to what we were doing here. The next question is, how do I keep my back from rounding in the deadlift? And that's a really big question. You basically just have to do it. If your back is rounding in the deadlift and you don't want it to round, then you would consider a round back pull a major technical error. So what that means is that you need to judge your RPE based on technical failure. So if you want to deadlift with a flat back, then basically practice every rep that you do deadlifting with a flat back. Pull all of your deadlifts with a flat back. If you round, then consider that a miss. And you have to do that for a while in order to kind of develop this new technique. You know, transitioning from being a round back puller to a flat back puller is difficult. And a lot of people have spent a considerable amount of time on it. Some people make the transition and some people don't. So again, like we talked about round back pulling in the past, it's not wrong, but you definitely want to go into it with both eyes open. Yeah, so you basically need to just focus on pulling with a round back. Mark, what would you add to that?
Well, just like you said, practice, I think, is the main thing. One thing I might add to it also is I see a lot of people, myself included, that have thoracic mobility problems. In other words, their shoulders are forward and down a lot of the time. That's just a postural problem. And so sometimes it helps. I know it's helped me to try to do some thoracic mobility work to get some more extension in the thoracic part of my spine, and you know, some mobility, extension mobility in the thoracic part of my spine. So, and and just practice trying to keep my shoulders back, and especially back and down, just as general postural thing, which I think does translate over to benching and deadlifting makes it a little easier to get in the right position in the first place. And I've dealt with athletes too. Same thing. It seems to, if their posture is not great, just when they're walking around or sitting or whatever, and their basically round back posture, I think that's a good place to start, is trying to help correct that. I mean, it has with me, and it has with folks I've coached. So,
just a couple things to add on to that. Really take advantage of the pause deadlifts that we do, just because the pauses allow you to spend a lot of time holding that bottom position. So if you get yourself in a nice flat position and practice your pause deadlifts, if you're really disciplined about it, then you'll get better at holding that position. Now, your tendency will be to want to round over because that's stronger for you right now. But you have to stay disciplined and continue to monitor that for technical failure. And the last thing that I would add to that is to remember to engage your lats in the deadlift. I've got a YouTube video that talks about using your lats in the deadlift, and I'll post a link up to that in the forum breakdown of this coaching call. Yeah, so that's about all for round back deadlifting. Let's talk real quick about using a belt or not using a belt. The question is, when it comes to squat variations, should we use a belt or not? And I would say that use a belt if it's designated. If it says squat with belt, then use a belt. If it's not designated, then it's up to you. I would typically recommend that you not use a belt unless you feel like you need it for safety reasons. Part of that is that I think that lifters should be capable of displaying some level of strength without a belt. The other part is that I know I've seen the articles, I've seen the research and whatnot about various muscle activation and stuff, and you shouldn't have any disadvantage to if you wore a belt all the time. I'm not sure that I agree with that, and I'm not sure that our current scientific thinking on the matter is totally conclusive. So I'm still standing by my previous thought that if you if you can squat without a belt at least some of the time. Now, you wouldn't want to do it all the time because of competition technique, and competition form development. So, but if you can squat without a belt some of the time, then I think that's going to be ultimately a good thing for you. Yeah. So wait, before I move on, I almost forgot. Mark, did you have an article that talks about that, or I can't remember if I've seen that in the pipeline or what. So can you fill me in a little bit?
Yeah. Just you might want to reference. I mean, for more information on belt or no belt during squat variations, go back and take a look at my articles, basically entitled that, belt or no belt.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm running on way too little sleep here, but yeah, I do remember that. You need to check that out. If you haven't checked it out already, that's at the article section on the RTS site. So if you're already looking at the forum, then if you look at the top menu, there's a button that says articles, and if you go there and look, you'll see Mark's article on this very topic. So we're about out of time, but we want to look at some videos real quick. So let's head over and look at some videos. So the first video this week is Todd's deadlift. So we zoomed out a little bit this week, and this week we can see the whole body. So let's look at this one real quick, and as usual, I'll be quiet while the video is playing. So not bad, not bad at all. You do have a little bit of rounding as the bar comes off the ground. It's a little bit. It's not a huge amount, but it's definitely there. So if we, I'll see if I can illustrate this. So this is kind of what you assume your bottom position is going to be. So then let's watch your back as the bar breaks the floor. This is the first rep, and that one's not so bad. That stays pretty consistent. So again, this is more or less your starting position. And so for the second rep, let's watch how this changes. So I'm a little late on the pause here, but you can see that you rounded just a little bit. Again, it's not dramatic. It's not anything that I would necessarily say that you need to fix immediately or anything like that. But there's a little bit there. Yeah. Mark, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, though, I mean, you know, everybody coaches slightly differently, but what I see too, and this is extremely common, is probably the rule rather than the exception, is I would say you're not getting tight enough in the bottom. And, you know, I could say that to just about everybody without even watching their deadlifts. And the reason I say that is when you start pulling, you'll see that your hips come up, which causes your shoulders and chest to go forward, and that's not the direction you want your shoulders to be going. So if you can get tighter in the bottom to where that doesn't happen, chest up, shoulders back and down, get locked in real tight, use the bar as a counterbalance so that doesn't happen. When you start pulling, the bar should just come straight up.
To kind of add on to that, I didn't see a whole lot of hip rise in this one. That was something that I was actually going to mention. That there's, I know a lot of people feel like hip rise is the devil, you know, and if you have any hip rise that you're missing pounds off your deadlift, and I don't agree at all. And I almost wonder if, you know, kind of dipping down a little bit more could even help that. Now, I do agree with Mark as far as tightness goes, but I think it comes back to lats. So I would, again, advise that you check out the video that I'll post in the forum about keeping your lats tight in the deadlift. I think that'll help you. But overall, I don't think it's bad at all. I'm not, as far as that 80% heuristic that we use, you're definitely above the line. You should be good to continue pulling how you're pulling, just a couple minor tweaks. And to me, if I was going to distill it down to one thing, it would be tightening those lats up, you know. So anything you wanted to, final thoughts you wanted to add, Mark?
No, I agree 100% with that. My point was just get tighter in the bottom. Yeah. I wasn't so much concerned about hip position as I was trying to make the point, if you're not tight enough in the bottom, when you start pulling, then everything sort of goes up and forward. Yeah. Whereas if you are tight enough, it just goes up.
Well, and I definitely agree with what you were saying about nobody is really tight enough at the bottom. Like if you're tight enough to deadlift 300, then you're not tight enough to deadlift 320. You know, to move up in strength, it's pretty much always going to require improving your tightness.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to the next video here. We're going to watch James's squat real quick. Okay. So a couple things on James's squat. He actually has a couple questions. His first question is, should I try to get more stretch reflex? And I don't really think you need it, James. I mean, to be honest, your squat is crisp and the technique looks fine. I don't think you need any technical corrections, to be honest. Your depth is right at where it needs to be. It wouldn't hurt you to sink it another inch or so if you're in kind of a leave no doubt sort of mood. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything really wrong with that video. Mark, do you have anything that you wanted to talk about?
No, I agree. The stretch reflex, I think, I agree. Looks crisp, and yes, I would definitely default on getting a little bit deeper because you're just right there. And I think you want to, if you're going to compete, I think you definitely need to take it out of the judge's hands and practice as you compete.
Yeah.
Get it a little deeper.
Yeah, so really there's not a whole lot of commentary to give you here, James, but that looks good to me. So last video, we're going to watch this. This is a 8 centimeter towel press. So let me see if I can turn the sound off on this, so I don't want to blast everybody with a bunch of sounds. So all right, so we'll watch this video. It's in Movie Maker for right now, so apologies for the format. So we'll watch it one more time. All right. Mark, what did you see? Anything that you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, again, as with the deadlift, get tighter. I see some leg drive, but I don't see as much leg drive as I would like to see. Like to see a little bit more elbow tuck, I think, which would a little bit more back involvement, upper back involvement, lat involvement, which would go along with the elbow, just a little bit of elbow tuck at the bottom. That's primarily what I'm seeing.
He had a couple questions that he asked. First is, how would he go about maintaining more scapular retraction? Like he feels like his shoulder blades come untucked, and he's wondering if we have any tips on how to maintain that. I would say part of that's going to come from kind of tucking your elbows a little bit. I agree with Mark. You seem to kind of be flaring out to the side a lot, and when you do that, that's a good strategy to lock out a single, okay? But when you do that, you do kind of come untucked a little bit, and it makes it hard for multiple reps, which kind of answers your next question is why do you die on the third rep here? And I agree with your email that a lot of it's a technical thing. You're kind of coming untucked, and like Mark said, you're not really very tight on the bench. Like you can see, like if I'm going to play the video again here, and you can see like your knees and legs moving around, like your hips. Basically, this whole chain is not solid and stable on the bench, and that's going to reverberate up through the chain. So basically, as a whole, you've not got enough stability. So I would focus on making sure that you're applying some leg drive and doing what you can to stay as stable as possible. So let's watch a couple more reps and see if you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah. So anything else that you wanted to add as far as the towel press video, Mark?
Well, one thing that's really helped me, I've had this same problem, how to maintain scapular retraction, and there was some discussion a while back about raw bench pressing and like doing a shrug during the bench press, and I tried that. That was bad. That was not working at all. So what's really helped me is trying to just really, really focus on heavy lat involvement, and even focus on bending the bar, which has helped with the lat involvement. If I feel myself getting any trap contraction into the thing, and pulling my shoulder blades up, that's bad. That usually doesn't go well.
Huh. So my experience is just slightly different. Now I am familiar with that trend that you were talking about, where it was kind of getting to be popular for a little while to tell people to shrug up, and that's something that didn't work for me either. But I don't really pull my shoulder blades down. Like in the deadlift, I pull my shoulder blades down like toward my back pockets. But for the bench press, I don't so much. Like I kind of go straight back, like I'm pinching a pencil between my shoulder blades. Now, with that said, I'm not exactly a bench technician, so I wouldn't just take that and run with it. The idea, though, is that you need to keep your shoulder blades retracted. If you're in the situation like James is in, where you're having difficulty keeping your shoulder blades pulled together, I would try both of those approaches and see which one resonates with you the most. Yeah. So that's basically all the time we've got. But before we go, I want to close out with one last question here, if I can get back to my slide deck. So last question, we've got a lifter who says that some people at the gym say that I'm basically overtraining by squatting and pulling more than once a week, and they want to know how I would respond to that. They said that they obviously believe in the program because they're doing the program, but how should they respond to these people? Now, I think the best response that you could possibly have is just get way stronger than they are. And I know that sounds kind of like a cop-out answer, but here's why. If somebody is telling you, not like if they're coming up to you and just inquisitive and they're saying, well, I notice you do this and I'm wondering why, how come you squat and deadlift so much? If they are asking about that, that's a little different. But the tone I get from your email is that these people come to you and say, hey, you're doing it wrong because you squat and deadlift more than once a week. They already have their minds made up, so you could show them articles, you could show them studies, you could have ironclad proof, and you could present it to them, and it's not going to convince them, because at that point they've invested in this idea emotionally, and that all the rational proof you give to them isn't going to change their minds. So the best way that you can convince them of anything is to give them emotional proof. Now, what's emotional proof going to look like? Well, if you get way stronger than they are, believe me, they'll start to wonder why that happened, and they'll get a little more curious. So it's definitely something that's worth checking out. Just get way stronger than them, and a lot of those problems will go away. Now, if your question was a little different, if it has more to do with how do we know this works, or if somebody is coming up to you and just genuinely curious, and they want to know, how is it that you can train the squat and deadlift so much? Well, there's a lot of ways that we know that this works. You could do some reading on repeated bout effect, and just if you think of your training more as practice in general, then you'll kind of come to a little different conclusion than the once a week crowd. And it after a while, it just is a matter of reality, right? So we know that you need to do more and more work to continue to get better. This is the overload principle in action. You know, you can't just lift the same weights and continue to get stronger forever. So you have to lift heavier weights, and eventually you have to do more work. That's just the way the overload principle works. So we know that your volume is going to have to go up over time, and eventually your volume is going to go up to the point where you can't fit it all into one workout reasonably. You know, your performance would drop too much. It's just too much fatigue. So at that point, your frequency has to increase. And that totally makes sense if you consider the fact that recovery is variable, and so is work capacity. You can develop your recovery over time. You can develop your work capacity over time. It's the whole reason that you can have somebody who's been lifting weights for a long time and they don't really get sore anymore versus a novice who's never spent any time in the gym. You take them in there in their first day of squatting and they can't walk for a week. So we know that your recovery gets better. We know that your ability to perform work gets better. You know, so why does this stop at once a week training? Well, it doesn't. You know, you can continue to improve these abilities for a long time. And then we can also measure it too in terms of measuring your recovery, measuring your work capacity. There's a lot of technology out there available that does it. Omega Wave, Check My Level. There's various HRV tests, and you guys all have access to Track, which is something that me and my guys designed to be specifically for this kind of training, to be specifically geared towards strength sports. All this stuff measures recovery, and we find that, well, yeah, actually, with some dedicated practice and training, you do get better at recovery, and you are able to handle more volume, and handling more volume then gets you more and more results. So you don't overtrain at all. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that overtraining is impossible, because it certainly is possible, but just because you squat more than once a week doesn't mean that you're overtraining. So we also see it in action all the time. So you see people doing this all the time. Olympic weightlifters, there's high-level power lifters. Basically, if you looked at the training of anybody that's at the World Championships in June, I mean, I would hate to try to put a number on it, but I would bet a surprising majority of them squat with a more than once a week frequency. Deadlifting with a high frequency is going to be a little less common, but it's not something that's going to be unheard of by any means. So high performers tend to use that method as well. So I think that sort of stuff, even if that's not totally convincing in a scientific sense by itself, it's definitely something that requires explanation. And from where I sit, the explanation is that training multiple times a week is just better. So with that, we're way over our time, but yeah, hopefully it got a bunch of questions answered, and hopefully that helps you guys out moving forward. So thanks, Mark, for being on the call with us. Thanks for lending your perspective. Thanks everybody for hanging out and watching this Q&A call. Check the calendar for next week's call time. As always, it's going to be next Tuesday, and the time, let's see, it'll be 6 p.m. here in Italy, so I'm pretty sure that's noon Eastern. Anyway, the call will be next Tuesday. Check the calendar for current call times. Send in any questions that you have. As always, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.